Show adaptation that you kind of already know because you clicked on this video, but guess anyway. Oh, good job, it's Wednesday. And the other one is Velma. Insults aside, this video compares the show Wednesday versus the show Velma. Why make the comparison, you might be wondering? One is live action, other's animated, not much to compare. Except for these two shows share one distinct similarity, which is also the topic of this video. That similarity being they both use beloved intellectual property, or IP, to create them. One does a really good job, and the other's a middle schooler's take on what's considered a joke. So I thought it would be an interesting discussion, comparing two shows that use the same foundation, but somehow end up on the opposite sides of the Rotten Tomato scale. I'm also an animator / wannabe writer. This part really wasn't necessary, but I think it adds context to why I'm making the video. Or it doesn't. So with all that being said, let's get started. These shows wouldn't even exist if not for their original counterparts. So that's why I'll be throwing in a brief history lesson. I find that it's important to show whether or not these new adaptations stuck or strayed away from the originals.
What game? It's called Is There a God?
Created by Charles Addams in 1938 as a cartoon for a magazine, with its original premise being little spotlights into a family's everyday life. Except for the Addams Family, instead of the kids playing outside, they were oiling up their kid-sized guillotine to chop off some Barbie heads. As for the original characters, we have Gomez, Morticia, Pugsley, Wednesday, and of course, no one can forget the second best character, Thing. Yes, I said second best. No one can be cousin it. I do expect a cameo in season 2 of Wednesday. Anyways, I found a quote from the creator describing the personalities of each character. Gomez and Pugsley are enthusiastic. Morticia is even in disposition, muted, witty, and sometimes deadly. Wednesday is her mother's daughter. A closely knit family, the real head being Morticia, although each of the characters is a definite character. The house is a wreck, of course, but this is a house-proud family just the same, and every trapdoor is in good repair. Money is no problem. After the comic took off, many more adaptations were made, the first being a TV show where the premise was pretty similar, but they lightened it up a bit in terms of their darker family tendencies. Apparently dark humor was frowned upon back then. Next up was the 1991 movie, which is my personal favorite, and was definitely closer to the original in terms of their dark nature. Besides the sequel to that movie, which was also awesome, that about does it for previous adaptations, and that ends the history lesson of the Addams Family, and the original IP behind the show, Wednesday. Now on to history lesson part 2, Velma's original IP. Scooby-Doo, where are you? Not in Velma, that's for sure, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Scooby Doo, a show started back in 1969 about 4 teenagers and their talking dog, traveling around solving mysteries in a van getting funded by what I'm assuming is Daphne's family's money and her sole reason for being on the Scooby Gang. But that's not canon, that's just my best guess. Moving on to the characters, we have Fred Jones, the leader, boring, kinda bland. Daphne Blake, pretty with the dumb blonde girl trope. Velma Dinkley, the brains behind the Scooby Gang. She's smart, kind of a nerd, and the true leader of the Scooby Gang. Move aside, Fred. Next up is Norville Shaggy Rogers, usually chilled and laid back, unless confronted by anything remotely terrifying, like a bank teller wearing a mask. However, that can be cured by any edible food. And lastly is Scooby Doo, who is honestly just a side character, really doesn't even need to be in the show. I mean, it's not like his name is in the title or anything. And I'm sure if you took him out and just used the 4 other one-dimensional characters, the show would be a hit. But if you do decide to involve this food-loving talking dog, you will find that he is loving, loyal, and just as terrified of everything as his best friend Norville is. With respects to your time and my disliking of history lessons, I will not be going through this entire list of show adaptations, movies, etc. Instead, I'm going to mention some of my personal favorites and factually the best Scooby-Doo shows / movies. Starting off with Zombie Island. This one, not this one. This one was good. This one sucked ass. I didn't actually watch it, but I already know. It's a remake of a classic. Of course it's going to be bad. Is there any evidence to counter my point? Then we have The Witch's Ghost, Alien Invaders, Cyber Chase, the banger that is the Loch Ness Monster. I mean, do you hear this song? It's been stuck in my head for 15 years. Yes, I'm old. But it's so good. Then we have the two films that only Shaggy and Scooby are in, The Boo Brothers and Ghoul School. And lastly, we can't forget about a pup named Scooby-Doo. This concludes the very brief history lesson on Velma's original IP, Scooby-Doo, and the history lesson altogether. Now moving on to the main topic of this video, seeing how the two most recent adaptations branch off from their original counterparts to create shows that bring either a new perspective or a different take altogether, but ultimately relate back and feel like they come from their original universe. This is how I feel a successful adaptation should be like. You take the original premise, characters, or universe, and create something new by putting a unique spin on it. Pretty basic stuff. In the context of this video, using the show Wednesday, their new take on the Addams Family was to create a show through the perspective of one of their main characters, Wednesday Addams, and really fleshing her out as a three-dimensional character rather than her just being an abnormally dark child like depicted in previous shows. If you don't relate back to the original IP when creating an adaptation from one, what was the point? Just create a new original show then. Alright, on to the comparison, starting with Wednesday, and seeing how it compares to the original IP of the Addams Family. Like I previously mentioned, the show is told through the lens of the eldest child of the Addams Family, Wednesday Addams. Quick recap of the first episode, and yes, I will only be comparing the first episode of each show for obvious reasons. Back to the recap. After getting expelled from her obnoxiously stereotypical high school for dropping a couple of fish into the high school pool, Wednesday Addams gets transferred to Nevermore Academy. Refusing to accept her new school and the expectations Wednesday feels she has to live up to, she sets out to escape from Nevermore. In her attempts to do so, she nearly gets crushed by a fancy rock, gains a little color, meets love interest number 1, goes to therapy, meets love interest number 2, performs a sick cello solo on the roof, has a heart-to-no-heart talk with Enid, rest in peace Nero, and almost dies to an extremely CGI'd monster, all resulting in Wednesday now loving and wanting to stay at Nevermore Academy. With that brief recap out of the way, it's now time to see how the show Wednesday compares to its original counterpart. Wednesday Addams in Wednesday, the show, as a character felt very authentic to the original being emotionless, pale, and of course had her iconic pigtails. And that's kinda as far as the original goes. These did start from comics, so you can only say so much within a few illustrations. That's why I really liked the approach they took with the character in the show Wednesday. They really pushed the exaggeration when it came to her loving all things abnormal. She doesn't hesitate to throw a couple of piranhas into the pool, risking killing a couple teenagers just to get back at them. The main point I'm trying to highlight is the way the creators took the character that started off in the original as a very one-dimensional character, pale face, pigtails, and the occasional doll stabbing, and really developed her into a very deep, well-thought-out character that felt natural in the world of the Addams Family. I mean, I swear they took inspiration from that quote from the actual creator I mentioned earlier, describing Wednesday as her mother's daughter, and actually implemented that into the show by having Wednesday strive to be the opposite. She actively doesn't want to be like her mom throughout the show. It's a very subtle addition, but in my opinion, it says a lot in terms of effort and passion put into the show. As for the rest of the family, they were also well done. Morticia and Gomez are crazy in love, which holds true through previous adaptations. Appearances are pretty spot on. I really like the 1991's take on all the characters, but the Gomez in this show, I think, really sticks to the original. He has a heavier set frame and a twisted, almost evil looking face, in a good way. Morticia is tall, pale, and thin, and Pugsley matches his original counterpart as well, besides the blonde hair, which I think is a better choice. Let's stick to consistency. It makes more sense. The rest of your family has brown hair. Come on. Now how the show expands off the original in terms of the story, the creators didn't have much to go off of to begin with. The Addams Family is about a family like any other, except instead of going for a stroll through the park, they'd rather take a walk through their backyard cemetery and probably play a classic game of
Uncle Atlas, wake up!
Previous adaptations usually took place inside their mansion and never really strayed far from it. In Wednesday, we don't even see the house. It takes place at the school and the town adjacent. I know they altered the school to relate back to the Addams Family manor because, I mean, look at this. Overall, the world I created for this new adaptation felt natural. I totally believed the world that the Addams Family lives in would have werewolves, vampires, and sirens. I mean, they have a cousin made completely out of hair, so you can kind of throw in any mythical creature and it would make more sense than whatever the fuck cousin it is. Now onto the show, who took a very unique approach in creating an adaptation, that being not actually watching the original show it branches off from, introducing Scooby Doo's most recent and regrettable adaptation, Velma. Just like in the Addams Family, there wasn't much to go off of in terms of the original show. Scooby Doo was simply about 4 teenagers and their talking dog pulling masks off of stupidly dumb men with financial issues. These were very one-dimensional characters, so there was a lot of room to really flesh out a character and develop them further. It's almost like the best show to do that would be, oh, I don't know, like an origin story. And just like with Wednesday, here's a brief recap of the first episode of Velma. But with respects to your mental well-being, and as an excuse for me to not have to rewatch this shit for the 4th time, I will be going through this first episode very, very briefly. And I thought, what better way to summarize the first episode than sticking to the theme of the show, putting in as little effort as humanly possible, and creating the lowest effort thing everyone was forced to do at some point in their lives, a high school presentation. I'm calling Velma. Funny? That's the real mystery we're about to solve. We begin with an origin story monologue. And you might be thinking, since it's about a woman, it's just a story about...
They are about girls? It's usually like, hey, what made this hot chick go crazy?
No, it's just about a woman getting insulted an unbelievably large amount of times. Next up, we make our way to school, into the girls' locker room, where a fight breaks out. And if I can remember correctly, it went a little something like this.
Have you ever noticed how pilot episodes of TV shows always have more gratuitous sex and nudity than the rest of the series?
So true!
Well, I, for one, think it's lame.
Oh, I actually kind of love it.
Apologies for the weird edited images here, but I recently learned that sex is bad, and it doesn't sell. And with me being a new YouTube creator, I need to increase my chances of success any way I can. But anyways, back to the fight.
Sex sells, and in today's overcrowded market, you need a hook.
The only hook a good show ever needs is good storytelling.
Then why is this show so low effort that it makes the live-action Avatar movie look like a masterpiece?
Because I never wanted to work on this stupid show to begin with. HBO Max made me.
Also, now you're just spitting in the face of all the fans who love Scooby Doo.
Who cares? I can do whatever I want.
Oh, you can't! Just admit.
You're throwing a tantrum and ruining this show.
And we meet Daphne. Oh, and someone dies.
She has no brain!
Next is the police station, where Velma has been arrested for murdering the brainless popular girl and gets interrogated by Daphne's parents, ending with Velma getting held at gunpoint for simply getting up from her chair. Velma makes her way home and is greeted by her lovely father
A basic bitch who doesn't even know how to use hashtags?
who welcomes her home with an onslaught of insults.
Because you're a weirdo.
You're a creepy loser.
You know, everyone shows love in their own unique way. I'm not here to judge, I'm just here to criticize. Velma then meets up with her stalker, some kid gets his legs cut off, completely normal, unlike popping out of a locker with no brain. I guess that's not normal. Whatever backs the joke, I guess. And then they go break into Fred's mansion for some reason. Because after this...
You didn't answer my VMs. Voicemails, my VMs. Voicemails, VMs. VMs.
The the rest of the show was muted. Scissors to the ears was my first thought after hearing this. Fortunately for my hearing, my hand made it to the mute button instead. Is it just supposed to be rage-inducing? Because I don't get it. I mean, if it wasn't funny the first time, saying it 7 more times is not going to make it funnier. More funny. Whatever. Nope, I'm done. That's it for the recap. Watch it yourself if you care. Oof. Onto the characters. Introducing
Bitch.
Son of Dilf, Drugs are bad guy, Self-confidence who? And oh wait, that's right. They took out the fucking dog. And that ends my presentation. Thank you. The similarities the show shares with its original counterpart are pretty scarce, but there are some, including Velma is smart because of science. Mysteries are involved, I guess. And Daphne's pretty. That's about it. Where the show strays away from the original is they made the very hard but necessary decision to take out that really annoying talking dog. And now that he's gone, the show can finally shine. And they also added a new character, Norville. What frustrates me the most, besides the tone-deaf, unfunny jokes, is the story, since I personally want to be a writer and create stories, good ones though. In the show Velma, which is allegedly supposed to be a joke-driven show, like South Park or Rick and Morty, where the characters are supposed to be one-dimensional because character development doesn't really matter in a show based around jokes. The jokes are what matter and should be the thing that stand out. But in Velma, they throw in the mystery of Velma's mom disappearing, these strange visions, leading you to believe that there's more to the story, which on its own could lead to a more interesting and good show, but end up just getting suffocated by the jokes. Or maybe I'm wrong, and the missing mom and the strange visions end up just being a really unfunny gag, and it wasn't even an attempt to throw in a storyline. But I'll never know. If you think I was too harsh on the show, I would disagree. My points, perhaps at times, were a bit much. Overall, I think we're justified. It's absolutely fine if you enjoyed this show. Everyone has their own sense of humor, some more tasteful than others. These are just my personal opinions. Do with that what you will. I don't care. The show itself has very little effort put into it in terms of writing and jokes. However, I really did like the style of the show, which leads me into the final part of this video, comparing Wednesday versus Velma, what worked and what didn't within both shows. Believe it or not, there are some things I liked about Velma. Absolutely none of them had to do with the writing or the story, but the style of the animation of the show. I'm an animator, and honestly, I really like the quality of the animation. Since it's an adult animation show, it falls in line with shows like Rick and Morty, South Park, and BoJack Horseman. Adult animation usually always have similar styles in terms of animation, which are very, very limited. I mean, South Park is one step above just throwing up a JPEG and some audio and calling it a day. But you don't watch adult animation shows for their creative character designs or smooth animation. You come for the humor. So it's refreshing to see an adult animated show put some effort behind the animation, even if they completely miss the mark when it comes to the humor of the show. But they do get bonus points for the animation in my eyes. The only other thing I liked, which goes along with the animation, are the visions Velma has. They look really fucking awesome. I wish they would have heavily leaned into the visions and created a less joke-driven show and more plot-driven, centered around those visions, because it screams Scooby Doo without being held back by its PG rating. And that about does it for things that I actually liked about the show. Everything else has already been heavily criticized on. Now, moving on to Wednesday. I've already complimented this show quite a bit, but I wanted to point out a few more things I really appreciated from the show. Starting off with the friendship between Wednesday and Enid. I love the juxtaposition of the two. I was kind of nervous at first, thinking Enid would be a heavily cliche, annoying character, but I think they gave her just enough of those traits, but didn't push it to the annoyingly toxic degree. She came off as a more modern take on a social butterfly. I also really liked the cello solo. Had to throw it in. What can I say? I love a string performance. And my only dislike of the show, which is honestly just a nitpick and kind of thrown in to balance out the scales, is the CG monster. Thought it looked weird in this shot, but then better in this one. But honestly, that's CG in a nutshell, and the show is not working off a feature film budget, so it's to be expected. All in all, I'm not saying you need to match the characters, settings, and premise of the original show to a T when it comes to creating an adaptation, but the new show should feel like it fits within the original world. Wednesday does, and Velma doesn't. Velma comes across as a show that wants absolutely no ties to its original counterpart, and that's very apparent with the exclusion of Scooby, the Shaggy stand-in Norville, and the very loose ties to any form of mystery solving. I wish companies weren't so hateful towards original content and stopped continuously pushing for spin-offs, remakes, and adaptations. I don't mind when they're done well, but I feel like a lot of animation suffers from that presently. I understand why companies like HBO Max create shows using pre-existing IP, because it comes with safety nets. One being a built-in audience that comes with creating a show that branches off of beloved IP like Scooby Doo, for example. I grew up with Scooby Doo as a kid, and I loved this show, and I still do. So it's only natural I would be curious about a new show using characters that I've grown up with and loved for a really long time. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. Another safety net is there's less risk involved. If the original show was a massive success that now has a built-in fan base, it's a pretty safe bet that this new adaptation will be profitable, which is all that matters. With that kind of foundation, it's a pretty safe bet that this new adapted show will also be a success. No, it doesn't. You still have to put effort in. I mean, goddamn, look at Wednesday. The show was a massive success because effort was put in. It was backed by passionate people who respected the IP and created a show that fits perfectly within the original world that it branched off from. The show was so successful it got free marketing because everyone was doing this dance. Overall, I would say good shows that derive from beloved IP are ones that keep certain qualities from the original, but also put their own unique perspective or spin on it, but that it still feels like it fits well within the already established world. When it doesn't, you get this. Alright, what I'm presuming is a very long video, it's time to wrap things up. Basically, it comes down to two shows, one backed by passion and love for the craft, and the other a lack of. With Wednesday, there was a clear love and respect for the original IP that was clearly seen throughout the show. Whereas with Velma, it felt like these creators wanted nothing to do with the original show and tried to incorporate it as little as possible, resulting in a tragic stain on the Scooby-Doo legacy. Mainly what I'm trying to get at is, that could have done better. Give me the script for Velma. It's based off of a kid's show with an unbelievably simple premise. It's not that hard, since original content is so goddamn terrifying, like a heartfelt story about a daughter and her father learning how to understand each other over a family road trip to college. But no one's gonna pay to see that. You need to add in a robot apocalypse and some outdated memes. Now that's a seller. Oh, and don't forget about the prepubescent son with the voice that's so goddamn deep it's competing with Corpse.
Hello.
Or you could just go the Disney route and copy and paste a classic, get a half-assed live-action remake of it, and call it a day. Well, my content will be similar to this, or it will be of my art, since I'm an animator. But ultimately, it will relate back to animation, so if you like that kind of stuff, consider subscribing. It's always appreciated. Alright, my incredibly long rant is over. Bye.